I think what they lose sight of is in the end, they're not thinking about you and me. They're not thinking about the United States or the country they serve. They're thinking about themselves.
I am a husband, a father, a lawyer, a Christian, and a proud Canadian. I started this series because it was clear that our nation needs truth. Not just another biased narrative, but real information of substance. We need access to facts and the freedom to think for ourselves. I'm Leighton Grey, and this is Grey Matter.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Grey Matter. Well, as followers of the show will know, we've been very blessed to have some really extraordinary scientific minds and medical people on the show, and today is no exception. Who we have on the show today is perhaps the leading person in terms of speaking out and documenting COVID vaccine harms, and his name is Dr. Peter McCullough. As you know, we've had other doctors on the show, including Dr. Roger Hodkinson, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, esteemed epidemiologist and one of the writers of the Great Barrington Declaration, Dr. Eric Payne of Alberta, Dr. William Mackis, Dr. Robert Malone, and we've even given a shout out to the other side. We've had Dr. Paul Offit on the show. And most people didn't like what he had to say. I think they're going to like what Dr. McCullough has to say a lot more. In any case, welcome to the show, Dr. McCullough. It's great to have you on. I've been looking forward to talking with you for some time.
Well, thanks for having me.
Great. So I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction to you, just for the few people who are not among your nearly 1 million Twitter followers. Before we do that, as we always do on this show, we have a few aphorisms just to frame our discussion. The first one is from your former president, perhaps future president, depending how many times they decide to indict him. That's President Trump, who said, "We will distribute a vaccine, we will defeat the virus," which I've always found to be a strange phrase, "and we will end the pandemic." Secondly, from Pope Francis, who said, "Thanks to God's grace and to the work of many, we now have vaccines to protect us from COVID-19. And then, of course, from Tedros Ghebreyesus, who is the head of the WHO, who said that I would like to assure the public that WHO will not endorse a vaccine that is not safe and effective. Of course, this topic could not be introduced without speaking to the fountainhead of science himself, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who said, quote, "We are allied in this battle against misinformation and disinformation that jeopardizes the health of people everywhere, but also our civil rights and our democracy. Throughout my career, I have always upheld the truth. It is a moral principle ingrained in me." I had to giggle when I read that part about truth, because I happen to be a Christian, and there's that part in the gospel. There's a conversation between Christ and Pontius Pilate about that topic. Anyway, who do we have on the show today? Well, we're very, very blessed to have Dr. Peter McCullough here. He is a renowned internist, cardiologist, and epidemiologist. He has been a leader in the medical response to the COVID-19 disaster. And he's also the chief scientific officer of the Wellness Company, which we're going to talk about today. And he manages common infectious diseases as well as the cardiovascular complications of both the viral infection and the injuries developed after the COVID-19 vaccine out of Dallas, Texas, USA. Since the outset of the pandemic, Dr. McCullough has been a leader in this medical response to the COVID-19 disaster, and he's published pathophysiological basis and rationale for early patient treatment of SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 infection, the first synthesis of sequent multi-drug treatment of ambulatory patients infected with SARS-CoV-2-19 in the American Journal of Medicine, and he subsequently updated in Reviews in Cardiovascular Medicine. He has dozens of peer-reviewed publications on the infection and has commented extensively on the medical response to the COVID-19 crisis. He has been published in The Hill, America Out Loud, Newsmax, Victory Channel, Real America's Voice, ABC, and Fox News Channel. He also testified in the U.S. Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs and co-moderated 2 U.S. Senate panels on COVID-19 therapy and vaccines. He's testified in the Texas Senate Committee on Health and Human Services, the Colorado General Assembly, New Hampshire Senate, Pennsylvania Senate, South Carolina Senate, concerning many aspects of the COVID pandemic response. And Dr. McCullough has had 3 years of dedicated academic and clinical efforts in combating the SARS-CoV virus, and also doing so has reviewed thousands of reports, participated in scientific congresses, group discussions, press releases, and has been considered among the world's experts on COVID-19. Wow, what a resume. Welcome to the show, Dr. McCullough. Where do we begin with you? I'd like to start with you, if you don't mind, with kind of a controversial appearance that you made on the Joe Rogan program, which sort of, I would say, sort of vaulted you into the public sphere and made you very well known. And during that interview, which I watched, it spans about 2 hours and 45 minutes. It was alleged afterwards that you made a series of multiple inaccurate, misleading, unsubstantiated claims about COVID-19. It seems as though history, though, has proved you ultimately right. Would you agree?
It turns out the Rogan interview was pretty late to the party. People always point to that. But in March of 2020, I had one of the first FDA new drug applications to address the pandemic. I had published the first paper showing doctors how to treat the illness, prevent hospitalization and death in August of 2020, one of the most widely read papers in the whole entire pandemic. I had authored and assisted the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons on the first home treatment guide in October of 2020. And then I was the lead witness in the U.S. Senate testimony on early treatment, bringing America the news that we could treat the illness November 19th of 2020. I testified in the Texas Senate in March of 2021, expressed great concerns regarding the safety of the vaccines just a few months after being out. And then I had a breakout interview with Tucker Carlson in May of 2021.
Right, I saw that one.
That basically sent Tucker on over a 2-year sojourn down this pathway. Then Rogan comes in December of 2021. So the first question about Rogan is, why was he so late to the party? And so, I give Rogan two options. I said, either he's just asleep at the wheel and he doesn't know what's going on, or he was afraid.
Yeah.
And I don't know which one it was. I can just tell you, when I finished with Rogan, he looked like, he needed a change in clothes or something. He looked like he's scared to death of what's going to happen. I told the Spotify producers, I said, listen, I'm bringing all the data, bringing all my slides. I showed all Spotify producers that, when I finished with Rogan, it set all the records he's ever had in his show. He eclipsed Elon Musk, went all the way up to Spotify, Neil Young, Prince Harry, President Biden, Jen Psaki in the White House. I messaged Jen Psaki. I said, listen, if there's any problems with anything I said, I'd be happy to come and review all the safety data with the president. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, it's not needed. The problem's with Rogan, not with you. Our transcript came out on this. The number one term we talked about was monoclonal antibodies, safe and effective, Operation Warp Speed. No one had any thing to say about that interview outside it was spot on. Now, the one interesting aspect of it is the interview with Rogan occurred on December 8th of 2021. The right. CDC broke the news on December 10th, 2021, 2 days later, that the Omicron variant broke through natural immunity. Right. And people said, well, you can't get it twice. I said, that was true with the prior variants. And that night I went on national TV, I addressed the nation, and I told on Fox News, I said, listen, the virus has changed and you can get it a second time, so get ready. So I've been spot on all the way through. You just made a whole series of comments regarding former President Trump and Tedros and all these people saying all these things which are regrettable, right?
Yeah.
Could you find a single regrettable thing that I've said?
No. In fact, one of the things I want to ask you about is one of the things you said on the Rogan program was that there was an intentional, very comprehensive suppression of early treatment in order to promote fear, suffering, isolation, hospitalization, and death. And it seemed to be completely organized and intentional. in order to create an acceptance for and then promote max vaccination. And you also said that it's pretty clear that the pandemic was planned. So my question for you, doctor, is why were you so certain about these conclusions? Obviously, these were very controversial at the time,
Mm.
still disputed now. I happen to agree with you. I think you're bang on based upon what what I know, which doesn't even begin to approach what you do about the pandemic. But why were you so sure about these things? What made you so certain?
Well, I was not only sure about them, I put them in writing. I
Right.
published a book, a 5-star bestseller, Courage to Face COVID-19. It's nonfiction. We
Yeah.
lay this out. This is clear now, and it's got 300 citations. There is a biopharmaceutical complex. There is a syndicate that's formed. They've met for years in Davos, Switzerland, at the World Economic Forum meetings. They're some of the most powerful people all over the world. They include the World Economic Forum, World Health Organization, Rockefeller Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, Gates Foundation, the Vaccine Incubator, CEPI, Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, which Gates and WEF formed, the regulatory agencies, CDC, NIH, FDA, the MHRA in England, Health Canada, TGA in Australia, SAFRA in South Africa, EMA. They're all tightly linked now through this mechanism. The suppliers, vaccine companies, other biopharmaceutical, biodefense suppliers. You'll see nearly all the key players in this at the World Economic Forum. And they've been at work now easily since, I'd say probably the first landmark is 2006, where HHS and Congress wrote the PrEP Act in the United States. The PrEP Act says we're going to have a pandemic, we're going to have a biological threat. And when we do, it's going to be a national security operation, and we're going to behave like we're invaded by an adversarial force, in this case a virus or a fungal spore bacteria, and then we're going to have countermeasures, and there's going to be broad protections against any immunity, any liability for these countermeasures, and they're going to be supported with unprecedented executive powers. That's all laid out in 2006, and then since 2012 forward, as chronicled in the timeline by Peter Breggin in the book COVID-19 and the Global Crisis.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes,
that's on our reading list. Great book.
right. There's 36 pandemic preparedness planning events, 36 of them since 2012. 25 have written documents. You can just read them. So again, you ask me how I'm so sure. I just read them, and then 6 of them are filmed. You can just watch them. That's how one is very sure that this is planned. Just watch the pandemic preparedness planning events. One of the most notable ones is Event 201, carried out in the fall of 2019. All the players are there, U.S. senators. Avril Lavigne, who's the current director of national intelligence for the United States, she's there, and she's paired up with George Gao, the head of the Chinese CDC. And do you know what scenario they had in Event 201? How do they cover up the emergence of the virus from the Wuhan lab? That's in Event 201. That's the fall of 2019. So
Right.
this was all laid out. One of the interesting things about this whole thing, it's all in the open. There's no conspiracy theories here. We're just simply laying out the facts.
Well, let me ask you this. We had Paul Offit on the show. I'm sure you're familiar with him, and he's patented some vaccines, as you probably know. And I put all of the quote unquote conspiracy theories, which are obviously no longer conspiracy theories, put to him, and I could not make a dent. And he's convinced that in fact, he said these vaccines are the greatest medical miracle ever. That's what he said about the COVID-19 vaccine. Why are people like Paul Offit so certain that they are right and you are wrong? Could it be that they are that captured by this biomedical what did you call it? Medical conspiracy
No, it's a
complex?
biopharmaceutical complex, right?
Right, right.
Right.
Why are they just captured by that, or how could they be so convinced that they are right? Understanding that there isn't any real consensus in science, but why are they so sure that you're wrong and they're right?
Well, there's simply our data and 2 or more important, viewpoints on things.
Right.
So The FDA says they cause myocarditis. They said it in June of 2021. Now, over a year later, Offutt comes out and says there's a link between the vaccines and myocarditis. Over a year later.
Yeah.
So to me, that seems like bias. So you may ask, well, why is he so enthusiastic? The answer is bias. And bias is not a good thing in medicine. So why would someone like him be biased, to making an incorrect conclusion? Number one is it's very possible his entire career is dependent on promoting vaccines. And, he's on the vaccine advisory panel for the FDA. His entire research portfolio of grants may depend on vaccines. Mine doesn't. The limited publications he has is on vaccines.
Right.
So if your entire career is depending on something, and to view it in a favorable light, let me add the kicker. Let's say he's afraid of COVID, and he took the vaccines himself. Okay, now we got a problem. Now he can't be objective because he's taken the vaccines. So as the vaccines, roll out, and we're seeing blood clots and heart damage and neurologic damage and stroke and all these problems, you can imagine the sheer terror that's in his mind. He can't be objective now because these vaccines are circulating in his bloodstream.
Yeah. That problem is probably not particular to him. That probably applies to a great many millions of people who have taken these vaccines and are sort of walking around in disbelief. One of the toughest things to get people to do is to admit that they made a mistake, or that they went wrong, or that they've been duped. And that may be part of the reason why as you say, all this data is out there, and yet there's still so much, let's call it, resistance to the truth. Would you agree with that assessment?
It's true. I think the only people who can give a fair assessment of this is people whose careers are not dependent on vaccines and people who didn't take the shots. They're the only ones that can give an unbiased opinion.
I got my hand up then.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, let's say I'm trying to give an opinion on a pacemaker. Well, if I got the pacemaker installed, I'm not going to be objective about it, right? I mean, I got to believe that pacemaker is doing a good thing in my chest. So, this is a simple form of bias. You'll see it a lot when you talk to people in general. Like, let's say you talk to people at work or at church or school, and they'll say, you know what, I don't want to talk about it. You'll say, listen, I'm kind of concerned about all the people, dying after the vaccines. I don't want to talk about it. That's a signal that they probably took the shots themselves. If someone is following the government schedule, they're on their 7th shot right now. Do you know any public figure that's come out and said they took 7 shots?
No,
not even President Trump, not Biden, not Harris, not Trudeau. No one has said they've taken 7 shots. Not even Offutt has said he's taken 7 shots. Why?
Well, one of the people who appears to have taken the shots, and this is a very high-profile person that apparently you've been working with, is the famous actor Jamie Foxx. And it appears that it was reported that he's asked you for advice about his own health, that he suffered a very severe series of health problems connected to the vaccines. Are you at liberty to talk about that case a little bit? Because I know this is one that's very topical because he has many millions of fans.
Jamie's a great guy. He sought me out. We had a conversation back in December of 2021. He wanted to take pictures, and which is true. I've met a lot of celebrities. I've had Eric Clapton came over to my house. A lot of people have wanted to get to know me, and that's all great. But, Jamie clearly knew the risks of the vaccines. I don't know what happened to him firsthand, but Hollywood reporter AJ Benza, close to the circumstances, said that, Jamie, after I had talked to him, was looking at a movie, and they forced him to take the shot, and that he's suffered some form of a stroke. He literally didn't talk to anybody for months. He emerged. He looked very sick, very pale, lost all his muscle mass. He said he had tubes in him. I presume that's a feeding tube and a tracheostomy tube, which would happen in a devastating stroke. I tweeted out to him and his family, said, "Hey, praying for you. I hope you held strong on what we talked about." And Jamie has not shown the courage to tell people what his diagnosis is and did he take the shot. And the same thing applies to Justin Bieber and to, Kirk Herbstreit and Al Roker and Bruce Arians. And we can just go down the list.
Deion Sanders had a bunch of these clots removed from his
Deion
leg.
Sanders, Tori Kelly. We can go on and on and on. The one thing they won't say is they didn't take the shot. And they quickly fade from the public view. You'll see this over and over again. Most recently, the son of famed basketball player LeBron James, Bronny James. Although I think that was a near miss. I don't think he had a full cardiac arrest. I was on the media right away, and I told people, listen, no shock, no report of intubation. He was in and out of the ICU in a couple hours. He's home the next day. That wasn't a full-blown cardiac arrest. But we have an important paper that has received a lot of attention, and that's on all the autopsies done that have come in case by case by case through the medical literature. But did you hear about that?
I have heard about that in my home province of Alberta. In fact, and this data is suppressed, but in terms of the connection between the vaccines and deaths, but the number one cause of death in Alberta now for the second straight year is unknown causes. And it's outstripping everything else: cancer, heart disease, everything. But no one can speak out and say that in fact it's connected to these causes. Some very brave doctors like Dr. William Mackis, whom I know you know well, he's going around everywhere talking about this, just as you are. But it is very, very frightening, very concerning that this important data is being suppressed.
Well, listen, you have the data. You said the number one cause of death is unknown.
Right.
So we know now from our paper, and Mackis and Hodgkinson are co-authors. We looked at every single case that had an autopsy. We had an extensive search. This project was commissioned and approved by University of Michigan School of Public Health. I'm a graduate of that school. Nick Hulsher is the first author. 600 papers. We sifted through all of them, got to the autopsy reports, extracted all the information, independently adjudicated the cases. The answer is, if someone dies after taking a shot, 73.9% of the time, it's due to the vaccine. This is very important. So it's not cause of death unknown. In Alberta, if they took a shot and they died, there's about a 74% chance it's due to the vaccine. Now, before COVID, death in Alberta, as it were everyone else, was always known. And death is in Western societies is 40% due to known heart disease, 40% known cancer. It means we know the diagnosis ahead of time. And then 20% other obvious causes: motor vehicle accident, suicide, homicide, drug overdose. Very few cases are unknown. So I can tell you it's not unknown in Alberta. It's actually the COVID-19 vaccine until proven otherwise.
Let's talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, about the wellness company. The two gentlemen you just mentioned who are part of that now, this wellness company. And I'm just looking at the advert for it from Foster Colson, who's the founder and chairman. And it says here that after more than 15 years leading and building successful businesses, he became aware of a failing medical system. And so this new solution is the wellness company. What is the wellness company the solution to specifically?
Wellness company is coming on its first anniversary. I'm the chief scientific officer. I serve in a part-time role. I advise the company, but it was the brainchild of e-commerce juggernaut, really incredible family, the Colson family out of British Columbia. Colson Aviation, they make some of the fastest planes in the world. Foster, is part of this storied family. And he approached me and other key leaders. We said we need to do this. we created a virtual healthcare company, and it's real. It's a computer application. You go to twc.health. It's got verticals of health education, nutraceuticals and supplements, telemedicine. We're talking about, engaging with a doctor, diagnostic tests, x-rays, prescriptions, all the treatment, dentistry, community dentistry, a network of community pharmacies that will always fill the drugs, exemptions from vaccines, other things. This is what people have been needing. The Canadian division, led by Hodgkinson, Macus, and others, now in business, and it's going to go worldwide. I can tell you right now, wellness companies recruiting some of the top people in the world. It's incredibly popular. United States, it's less than $10 a month to be a member, and all the products very affordable. Physician visits are very affordable. I think they're $60 or less, and it's 24/7. It's really a terrific service. A lot of people have it as a backup. They have the regular doctor, but they have a wellness company as a backup.
And it's open to anyone who wants to access these services. They just need to visit the website and follow the menus, and they'll be led to people within their area if they need a particular, like a home visit. But there's also a lot of information there and services that are available online as well, right?
That's true. A lot available online. One of the key products is called Spike Support. We found out, people take these shots. They can't get the spike protein out of the body. They feel sick. They got blood clots, heart damage. I mean, it's an awful thing. It's going to last for years. They've got to get rid of the Wuhan spike protein. The vaccines are a genetic code for the spike protein, the spine on the surface of the virus. That's the dangerous, lethal part of the virus. People take the vaccines, they got the genetic code for that stuff. Now the spike protein, you got to get it out of the body. Human enzymes don't break it down. Spike support is based on nattokinase. That's a Japanese innovation. It's derived from the fermentation of soybeans by a bacteria, Bacillus subtilis natto. The Japanese have been eating natto for about 1,000 years for its health benefits. For 20 years, it's been a cardiovascular supplement. It's a mild blood thinner, but it digests the spike protein. Now we add to it two products in a recent paper that we have in press right now. We add liposomal curcumin, 500 milligrams twice a day, and bromelain, another family of enzymes, 500 milligrams a day, in addition to spike support, which is 2,000 units twice a day. So three things: wellness company, spike support, and we add in separately curcumin and bromelain. We've got a triple combination. Our clinical experience with this is wonderful. It accelerates the time to where people feel better. We get ahead of the curve on the spike protein production. We're seeing a great improvement. Now, I can't make any therapeutic claims because large clinical trials are not even planned yet. But most people say, listen, we can't wait 20 years for this one. People took these shots. They regret it. They want a detox. Again, it's base spike detox, wellness company, spike support is the first part of that. Add to it curcumin and bromelain.
Right. When we had Dr. Macus on the program, he mentioned the benefits of, for example, like a 3-day water fast in terms of trying to renew the body's natural immune system. Would you agree with that advice, that could be something that people could do as well?
Almost all religions have fasting as a component of their religious practice, and it's probably for its health benefits. Fasting has many benefits to the body. One of the things it does is accelerates this process of normal cell turnover called apoptosis, which the cells need to do when they've got the spike protein. So I give credit to Dr. Paul Merrick at the Frontline Critical Care Network, was the first to propose this. And this is a reasonable thing. I do it, people can do it as little on a daily basis, do a 16-hour fast. That means no eating from 7 p.m. to 1 p.m. Or they can go on a full fast, just drinking fluids, as Macus suggested, for 3. I have a patient right now doing it for 5 days. So it's possible. Make sure you're safe from ask your doctor about it. It's safe for your condition. But that can be part of it. We know other nutraceuticals and supplements can be added. Let me just say, in patients who've taken the vaccine, one of my usual practices is I check for autoimmunity. This is very important.
Okay.
Because the vaccines trigger the immune system over and over again, the immune system can attack its own body. And so there are critical blood tests called the ANA test, the antinuclear antibody, and the ANCA test, the anti-neutrophilic cytoplasmic antibody, are important. And if there's autoimmunity, sometimes we use additional drugs like hydroxychloroquine or prednisone. So people have taken the shots. They feel sick. About 15% of people feel sick. So if people are listening to this, they've taken the shots. It's not in your head. You really do feel sick. A Zogby survey showed that. And you need help. So I think, whether the doctor can treat these post-vaccine syndromes or they need to go to the wellness company, people should take action.
Yeah. You publish a wonderful periodical, I guess, online that I receive. I'm a subscriber to, called Courageous Discourse. And in one of the recent ones that was published actually just earlier this week, there was a piece entitled COVID-19 Vaccine-Induced Cardiac Arrest, the Miracle of Pilot Snow. You want to talk about this a little bit? I thought this was really fascinating.
Tremendous case. I got a chance to meet Bob Snow, a captain for American Airlines. He took the Johnson & Johnson shot against his will in the fall of 2021. And then a few months later suffers a cardiac arrest just as he pulls up an American Airlines jet to the jetway in DFW Airport here in Dallas. And let me tell you, it was hundreds of people on this plane. If he would have had a cardiac arrest, 10 minutes earlier, it would have been just a total disaster during the landing. And believe it or not, by the grace of God and good luck, I asked him, I said, was there a doctor there to shock you? He goes, no. He goes, I went out. He goes, literally, it was lights out. And it turned out when they called 911, the paramedics were at the gate next door dealing with some older lady who was having some medical problems. So they literally just were over there, lickety split. They got the paddles on. They defibrillated him. Took him 3 shocks. They got him back. He didn't suffer any neurologic damage. And then from the hospital where they took him to, it was right by the airport, he said, look, this is what the vaccine did to me. And he's right. It was a vaccine-induced cardiac arrest. He had a defibrillator placed, and he had a unique type of defibrillator, and I show it in the Substack if anybody's interested. It doesn't go into the heart itself. It doesn't go into the blood vessels. It literally sits below the pectoralis muscle, and it senses the heart. It simply would shock if he had another cardiac arrest. And I learned that he can do all kinds of physical activities, and unlike a typical patient with an ICD. And I imagine Nick Uichuchu, who is a USC player who had a cardiac arrest probably after the vaccine last year for USC basketball. He has a defibrillator in place, and he's back on the team. And now his teammate Bronny James just had a near-miss cardiac arrest on USC. So USC ought to be pretty used to these cardiac arrests. And I wonder if the players now who are taking the vaccine and suffering cardiac arrests, if they survive, if they're going to get these subcutaneous ICDs and be able to go back and play. Particularly, I wonder if DeMar Hamlin has one.
Right. This link between the COVID-19 shot and heart inflammation, I was reading now there's actually, and this is again from your Substack, that there's a CDC safety group that says now there's a likely link. Of course, you've been saying this for a long time, but were you surprised to hear that coming out of the CDC? I mean, they've obviously been resisting the truth about this link for a long time, haven't they?
They're pretty late to the party. I point out that the FDA on their open meeting slides, of which Paul Offit, by the way, was there, Verbeck, October 22nd of 2020, they have on their slide that they expect to see myocarditis. This is October of 2020. It's expected that they're going to see it. It's on their slides. So when the FDA comes out with an official warning in June of 2021 that the vaccines cause myocarditis, every single medical college, every single medical system, every single sports league should have paid attention to the warning. And so for the CDC to come out a year later and say, well, maybe there's a link. Well, wait a minute, the FDA said they cause myocarditis. The sad part of this is that during COVID, the NCAA, Big Ten Athletic League, the U.S. military, they actually had screening programs for myocarditis with COVID. They didn't find much. was a handful
Mm.
of cases, no serious hospitalizations or deaths. So COVID itself doesn't cause serious myocarditis. But when the vaccines came in, the FDA said they cause myocarditis. And you know what? None of the sports teams screen for it anymore. So if they were going
Hmm.
to force the players to take the shots, they should have been screening them for myocarditis. The NFL Players Association didn't want the shots. The NFL forced it on them after the NFL took money from the Biden administration HHS called COVID community core money. They felt obligated to force it on the players. Well, if they're going to force a vaccine on athletes that causes myocarditis, and that started August of 2021, they should have had myocarditis screening.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you as a cardiologist, when there's heart inflammation, we can't let the players exercise because the surge of adrenaline will trigger a cardiac arrest. We knew that long before COVID. So, the case in point that's the saddest case so far is Oscar Cabrera Adames. I don't know if you're following this case, but
Yes,
he's
I
a,
read about this one.
yeah, he's a European Foreign League basketball player. He takes the shots, has myocarditis, and he has a cardiac arrest on the floor. Face down. He just face plants. He's in full cardiac arrest. They resuscitate him. He survives. And then he tweets out that he has myocarditis due to the vaccine. So this is now there's complete transparency. While he's trying to return, and then he's on a treadmill in a health center outside the United States, and he has a full cardiac arrest and he dies on the treadmill.
Oh my
Now that's
goodness. Yeah.
just 2 years after vaccine-induced myocarditis. That case really, really scared me. Now
Right.
pilots know his ICD has not gone off. That's great. Hopefully the USC player Nick Uwachuchu, hopefully his ICD didn't go off. Hopefully
Right.
Damar Hamlin has one, but who plays for the Buffalo Bills. But the ICDs are there for a reason. And I can tell you, Adamas did not have an ICD, otherwise it would have saved him.
When we had Dr. Hodkinson on the show, he mentioned that the boosters actually make it worse because they increase the amount of the spike protein that's in the body. And I was noting on another piece that you published recently on this Swiss prospective cohort study demonstrating the frequent heart damage after Moderna mRNA 1273 boosters. So is that accurate that actually people should stay away from, if people have taken, let's say, the first two shots, they should stay away from these boosters because with each booster, it actually will increase their risk of suffering from this heart inflammation?
It's true. Well, first, there's a paper by Mansugian from Bangkok, Thailand, showing that with the second shot, children ages 13 to 18, there's about a 2.3% rate of myocarditis or heart damage. Now, this paper by Bergen and colleagues from Switzerland, 777 women, who are largely women who are nurses, they take the third shot of Moderna, and now the rate of heart damage is 2.8%. And two of them actually met a classification that probably was myocarditis. They didn't actually do MRIs and check on everybody. But this is really disturbing. Myocarditis is common. It looks like it gets worse with each shot. What people need to know is if they tolerated the first two shots fine, they shouldn't go out and get a third one. Sooner or
Right.
later, their number is going to be called up. I haven't seen a single player come out and say they took 7 shots. Again, you and I can't think of anybody. I
No.
think people know in their minds that these aren't safe. If these were the elixir of life, everyone would be coming out telling you they're on their 7th shot. Even President Biden won't do that.
Hmm.
Why won't he come out and say he's on his 7th shot? I think everybody tacitly now understands they're not safe. They are regretful. They're humiliated. They are, I think, honestly, I think they're guilty. And they
Yeah.
know that their public statements and actions have harmed others.
Speaking of Joe Biden, you published a piece expressing concern about public servants like Joe Biden, McConnell, who I saw that really sad video of him suffering. It looks like a stroke or something while he was in front of the podium, and of course Dianne Feinstein, who are in mental and physical, decline. You joke that you should set up a clinic in Washington D.C. but you did express serious concern about this, that having these people who are quite elderly in public service is probably not a really good idea. Is that right?
It's true. Most of these elderly people, what Biden, McConnell, and Feinstein have in common, they each are on their served 6 terms in the U.S. Senate, 6 years each. Biden was
Yeah.
a 2-term vice president, now a 1-term president.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a long period of time of
Yeah.
service. I think what they lose sight of is, in the end, they're not thinking about you and me. They're not thinking about the United States or the country they serve. They're thinking about themselves, and
Right.
they're thinking about the legacy that they're going to leave. They're not behaving like they're employees that they report to us like they're civil servants. They're
Mm-hmm.
behaving like they're royalty, that they're kings or queens or what have you. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the problem with longstanding public service, is they start to lose sight of the public. And to make matters worse, when people get old, they lose insight. They actually don't
Right.
realize that they're not as strong and they're not mentally competent. All of, anybody listening to this who's in our age group can think of a senior citizen in their circles where they lost insight.
Right.
Right? So if you and I were on a program like this and I just froze for 30 seconds without blinking, without saying a word, I'd be going to the hospital,
Yeah.
thinking it's a stroke or it's a petit mal seizure or hypoglycemia. I mean, there's a long list of serious things. And that's what I said. I was called on national TV. I was on Fox News, and I told America, I said, listen, I see this in my practice. These are serious events, and look at Biden. Biden has moderate cognitive dysfunction. You can tell he has motor weakness. He's fallen multiple times, as many senior citizens do. Soon he's going to risk a hip fracture. We've seen this over and over again. He's fallen on a bicycle right on his hip. I mean, you can see the risks that are right there. Look at Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell fell in March. He's the House Minority Leader. He fell in March. He's hospitalized with broken ribs and a concussion. Now, 4 months later, he has this frozen spell. To me, it looked most likely like a petit mal seizure, an absence seizure,
Right.
but very serious. And then look at Dianne Feinstein. She developed shingles, but the worst type of shingles meningoencephalitis. That means the shingles of varicella zoster virus invading the brain and the lining around the brain. And then it hits her 7th nerve on the right side, and it causes Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. Ramsay-Hunt syndrome is the same vaccine syndrome that Justin Bieber has. She should give Justin Bieber a call, or vice versa. All 3 of these elderly people could have had their syndromes caused by or markedly worsened by COVID-19 vaccination.
Mm-hmm. So,
I mean,
Dr. McCullough, I'm going to ask you this only half jokingly. Since we can rule out advanced age, do you have any explanation for the obvious mental deficiencies of our Canadian Prime Minister?
Well, I can tell you what, he ought to give Bill Gates a call. Bill Gates and Trudeau have something in common, and that's a bad marriage. And I can tell you what, the spouses are seeing this, and they're seeing changes in their husbands, and they see streaks of malevolence. They see streaks of, for lack of a better word, evil. And they have to get away. They have to get away. And do you remember when Trudeau goes on this rant? He's wearing a leather jacket, and he goes,
"Oh yes,
if
that's
any
one of them
who's unvaccinated sits next to somebody vaccinated on a plane, I mean, you could tell he lost his marbles. The vaccines don't even work. So I can tell you, there's a big element of psychological fear, and he just can't handle it. Do you remember Trudeau took the shots and then he gets COVID? I mean, how humiliating is that?
More than once he's gotten COVID.
Yeah. Oh, I think one of the worst is, did you ever see that interview where Anderson Cooper took all these shots and then Bill Gates took these shots? Then Anderson asked Bill Gates, well, we took all these shots. We both got COVID together. He said, Bill, are we done? Are we done taking shots? And then Gates, who's not a doctor, says, well, I think to be sure, we should take more shots. I mean,
Yeah,
historians are going to write about this stuff. You
yeah,
started out with all these regrettable statements, and you just said you can't find a single regrettable statement I've made.
yeah.
I've made 15 million statements according to a Google search engine.
Right.
I've made tens of thousands of written profiles, videos, etc. You can't find one. How can that be? How could I have a flawless track record in my statements? And how can these other people make such giant, erroneous
Oh,
errors?
maybe only one of you is committed to telling the truth. And in that vein, you become somewhat involved in this connection between the medical, the medical world and constitutional freedom. And there was a publication by your foundation. This is by Mr. Leake. But you've also been involved in some litigation. And you talked about a landmark lawsuit concerning wrongful death during pandemic hospitalization. So is part of your work now sort of expanding out, not just from hardcore research that you do and all your publications, but also getting involved in some of the resulting uh, lawsuits and litigation on behalf of people, for example, like Mr. Hartman, whose son was killed,
Mm.
who died because of vaccination. Is that part of what your work is expanding out into now, or do you want to talk about that?
Sure. The McCullough Foundation is a big advance. It's fully 501c3 tax deductible donations. McCullough Foundation, McCulloughFND.org. It does support my legal efforts. I'm a witness now, pro bono witness in over 100 cases. I'm a plaintiff or defendant in about 12. I was a highly sought after medical expert witness long before COVID. I was in some of the highest profile medical cases in the country, including intellectual property cases. So I know my way around the courtroom. I'm involved in multiple Canadian cases at this point in time. And with my publication track record, I mean, who's going to challenge it? We've already
Right.
kind of gone through that. I've already published more
Yeah.
on COVID than anybody that you're going to bring up to, to be an opposing witness. And not only that, but I'm in practice. I've treated COVID patients. I published the first one to publish how to treat it. I'm publishing the first methods on how to treat the vaccine injuries. My track record's been flawless. People have tried to take different strikes against me. It hasn't worked. I just continue to cite the data like I did today. I know the facts, and I've been honest. I've been honest with America, Canada, and the world on this.
Yeah.
So,
Dr. McCullough, before you go, I just want to quickly mention a couple of your books. You mentioned one of them, The Courage to Face COVID-19. This is a book that was published in May of last year. It's available on Amazon, anywhere that you buy books. And this is the story of doctors who developed a safe and effective early treatment for COVID-19 and their battle with the biopharmaceutical complex to suppress it. And there's a second book, which is The Next Wave is Brave. And that seems to be what you were just talking about.
yeah.
Standing up for standing up for medical freedom. This is a book you just published last fall with some other authors. So I just mentioned those in addition to the foundation. People who are watching this, taking this in, please check out those two books. I've read the first one. I haven't yet gotten to The Next Wave is Brave, but I read The Courage to Face COVID-19. And it's just a brilliant book. Really, really enhanced my understanding of some of the things that Dr. McCullough was talking about today.
Well, thank you so much. I have to ask you, Courage to Face COVID-19, was it a slow read or a fast read?
It was slow. I'm not a medical person, and so I
Oh,
had to go
okay.
through it. I had to spend some time. I was helped by the fact that I read two other books, the Bregan book that you talked about, and
Mhm.
also the book that was published by I think a group of authors, the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. book, the real Anthony Fauci. Yeah, and you worked a lot on that book. Is my
Right.
understanding. Is that
Yeah, I'm
right?
the most frequently mentioned doctor in those. But Courage to Face COVID-19 is the only book in the COVID era that's written by a best-selling author, John Leake, and it has a
Yeah,
beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's a story. So it's the only
yeah,
one that you can actually read as a story, as a
yeah.
page-turning kind of
That is
gripping
true.
turning.
That
And
that yeah.
others are basically a timeline or some type of
Yeah.
evidence timeline. And so sometimes what people say is, listen, I want to read a story. I want to just be able to get through it. So most people do think that it moves along. Looks like it's going to be a major motion picture, which is really exciting.
Oh, brilliant.
And yeah, it's going to be the only one that'll be a motion picture. So if people want to learn about what's going on and they want it in a way that's going to be fun and pick it up and read, it's not a boring medical book. It's
No, it
about,
isn't. It's true.
it's about a real struggle. And I just want to encourage your audience, visit my personal website, Peter McCullough, MD. That'll take you everywhere. I've got the top accounts on Twitter, Getter, Truth Social, LinkedIn. McCullough Foundation, McCulloughFND.org. That will tell you the mission statement, all of our critical work on analysis, education, public policy in this legal interface. I think we're going to go through a long justice phase now.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to see it. I think finally the attorneys will fire up. They're looking for the top experts. I'm very busy, as you mentioned. I've testified
Yes.
in so many state venues now, and I keep getting more and more requests. People say, "Listen, we can't have this happen again."
Thank you, sir. It was our pleasure having you as our special guest.
Thank you so much for having me.